Since the internet boom, our attention spans have decreased significantly to 8.25 seconds, which is less than that of an average goldfish. And when it comes to your creative portfolio, it's never been harder to get noticed online. A company might have to look through hundreds of portfolios, so the question is, how can I do something that's a little bit different, and how can I do something that captivates their attention in that tiny little window of opportunity? Well, like, comment and subscribe, because I might just have the solution that you're looking for. We live in a techie world now. Web pages are no longer just static, they're animated, they're dynamic, they have a sense of depth. There's a duck that dances when you scroll. So when you have websites like this making an impact and doing enough to make us stop and sort of hang about a bit longer, what's stopping us as creatives utilizing this technology and these techniques in our own online portfolios? Creating long-lasting and memorable experiences for brands, clients, and even employers that will in turn earn us more cash, dosh, wonga. So today we're going to be checking out a new platform called Dora, not that one, this one, who have kindly sponsored today's video. They hit me up and I was genuinely blown away about how easy it was to use for a little web design dum-dum like me to create an exciting portfolio. Some of the cool things I really like about this platform is it has 3D integration, so you can drop 3D assets straight into it, which is really nice. And it has animation and timeline functions, so you can create things animating in and out of the page, things happening as you're scrolling down, which is really, really nice. If you use my link down below, it's free to use and free to get a site live. If you don't know where to start with your portfolio, then do not worry, because in a second we're going to talk over a basic structure for you to follow. So design aside, let's have a quick chat about what to actually include in your portfolio. Number one, people will be judging you from the moment they land on your page. Fact, plain and simple. The first thing they see will be their first impressions of you, and that first impressions might be around 8 seconds, so make it count. You want to add in who you are and what you do, and you can add a little bit of spice into this. I'm Louis, a graphic designer. Doesn't really give enough oomph to make people go, oh yeah, go on. I'm Louis. I create impactful experiences for industry-leading brands. Now, granted, it's a little bit of a statement, but it makes a point. Another example. I'm Linda. I design tasteful brands for exciting street food vendors. Make it very direct for who you're targeting, because ultimately you want to tailor this portfolio for the type of work that you want. This also means that potential clients who fit that description feel like this is really speaking directly to them. Number two, we've got them hooked, hopefully, and now the proof is in the pudding. That was a food pun. You've made your opening statement, now it's time to back it up. This is what you can do, and when it comes to how much you should actually show, I genuinely think around 3 to 5 projects is enough. If you're more experienced and you've got more work that you really like, then feel free to add some more in. But make sure it's your best work, and make sure it's the type of work that you want to show for the type of client that you want. Also, one of the big things is make sure that it's mocked up properly. Presentation of your work is so important, and bring it into the real world. Even if it didn't make it to that stage, show that it's out there. It's professional and it's not just an idea. There are tons of free great mockups to use out there, so just get searching. Again, everyone has short attention spans. Don't worry about writing up too much for each project. Keep it short and sweet, keep it brief and to the point. Number 3, this can be done in a few different ways, but this bit is the trust factor. You've said what you can do, you've shown that you can do it. This final bit is that reassurance, just to let the client know that you are the right person to go with. People ultimately, no matter how much they say they don't, care about the opinions of others. So this section could include a number of different things just to back up what you're saying from other people. For example, some logos of other clients that you've worked with. If they are recognizable brands, then this adds a layer of credibility and just gives the client a bit more of a reassurance that your work is at a certain level. This can also be done with testimonials. If you've got some clients who are happy to share their feedback publicly, again, this just adds that level of reassurance. You can also add like a social grid in there, show that you're being proactive, show that people are reacting to your work, if people are liking and commenting on it. Say for instance on Instagram, again, just showing that your work is out there and people are liking it, and it just adds this extra level of trust that the client can go with you. Just make sure that this is at a professional level, not you smashed on a Friday night on the way home, eating at McDonald's or something. Keep it clean. And finally, number 4 is the contact button. You need to make it as easy as possible after your client has seen all of this for them to get in contact. Let them know how they can do that and make it as easy as possible to start that initial conversation. I would also recommend having this somewhere in the top bar, just in case they don't make it to the bottom of the page, so it's visible at all points in time. As far as I'm concerned, that's it. That's the basics. You can of course add in more elaborate pages, say that they click on each project. You can have a bit more of a description, maybe a bit of a breakdown and showing your process. But realistically, those things I just mentioned are the most important, and they are the things that are going to land you that job. Everything else on top of that is a bonus. So we've got our plan down. Let's start designing. Now, it's important to notice that as we get to this design side, this website has loads of cool and interesting functions, but you can be as clean with it as you want. It doesn't have to be this crazy, super over-the-top immersive experience. You can tailor it to your brand. If your brand's a little bit more minimal and, subtle, then that works as well. Ultimately, I'm going to run you through a lot of the different functions and a lot of the things you can do with it, and then it's up to you to make that your own. Your personal brand and your personal style is what is important to show. Now, the reason I like this Dora platform over others is because I feel like I'm designing in a design program, which gives me a lot of freedom to build whatever I want. So you can really get creative and be really original. Here is one I made earlier, and if I scroll down, you can see that we have 3D elements, we have things animating in, and if you hover over these pages, you get these cool 3D graphics popping up. I was just thinking overall, what would be a fun experience for someone that is going onto my portfolio, and what will make them hang around a bit longer, or maybe even tell someone about it. So that is what I'm going to walk you through, a bit of a whistle-stop tour on how you can easily create all the elements you see on screen now to put together your own scrolling portfolio page. Once you have created an account, and just to reaffirm, this is free and you get your own free URL, so there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be using my link down below to check this out, but you'll be brought to this homepage. There are a load of additional help videos and documents on how to use the platform, so if there's anything that I don't cover, it should be in there. There is also this tutorial page along with other design sites which you can go into and sort of like reverse engineer. You can edit it and look at how things have been made, which I found really useful when I was trying to figure this out for the first time. So to create a new site, we can create one here. Once created, you will see this window, sort of like an artboard that you would see in any sort of design program. This is called your viewport. If you have used programs like Photoshop, then a lot of this functionality is going to be fairly familiar to you. You have your layers panel, pages, your toolbar for adding elements, preview buttons to test out your site on different devices, all of your design functions and settings. And then at the bottom, you have this animation timeline, which if you've ever used After Effects, it's very similar to how you would animate in there. The scroll section here shows how big your page is. At the moment, it is 100 VW, which is viewport width, and 100 VH, which is viewport height. So 100 by 100, this is one full page on any device that you are viewing it on. So say you're designing this for mobile, that would be one iPhone screen wide, one iPhone screen high, and the same applies if you're designing this for a MacBook screen. If you want to extend this, you can set the scroll to vertical scrolling and then extend the page. I'm going to set mine to 300 VH, which is 3 full screens worth of scrolling. So I'm going to start off by making a background, which I can do by selecting this container. I'm going to use a light grey color and scale it to my page size. As we create this, you can notice that the measurements over here are in pixels, which means it will be a set size and it's not going to be reactive to different screen sizes or if I sort of move the page. We can fix that by changing the dimensions to match the page 100 VW and 300 VH. That way, it will always stay exactly the same size as our page, regardless of what device you're actually viewing it on. A lot of these functions are to make everything on the page reactive to different page sizes. The reason these are called containers is because they act like mini folders. When you add elements over them, they will add them into a section in your layers panel. So if you're designing, say, a navigation bar, which I can do here by dragging a container in, I'm going to make that 80 pixels high and 100 VW wide. So it's always reactive. And then say I want to add some text in there that will act as my buttons. This will become its own little folder containing all of the elements within this container and making it easy to move about afterwards. Think of this as like sort of creating a group or a folder within Photoshop. So let's continue making a navigation bar. At the moment, this is just going to be sat floating in the middle of your page. What we want to do is pin this to the top of the page, if that's something that you want to do, so it's always at the top when the rest of the page is scrolling down. This is where we start to get into constraints. If we select our container, you can see that it has these toggles on each side. These are constraints, basically padding that can be connected to any of your other elements on the page. So if I connected it to the top of my viewport, it will always stay connected to the top. You can set on the right hand side here how far away or the padding between those two connected objects, or you can just drag this back to the top of the page. So if we look at a quick preview, because this is now, connected to the top of the page, whenever we're scrolling, the navbar is always going to stay stuck to the top. We will get a bit more into constraints in a second, but let's sort out this navigation bar because it's looking a little bit dull. So we have our text in here, and at the moment, if you hover over it, nothing will happen. This is where we can get into the components tab. This tab will let us set a state for when you're interacting with that object. For example, this button. Let's select it and go to the components and make a new state. So I want this to animate when you hover over it so people know it can be clicked. I can connect my object to the state 1 and then go over to the settings and select hover. When it is being hovered over, I'm going to change the color to yellow. We also want to make sure that the text selected have their width and height set to hug. This way we can change the text at any point and the box will resize to the text. There are loads that you can do with this, loads of options to play with, so go wild. If I refresh my test page and have a little look, I can see that now when you hover over it, this is animating. Lovely. I'm going to need multiple pages, so what you can do is effectively use this as a style and duplicate it. Because we set this as hug earlier, we can simply copy and paste this button and then just rename it to create our other buttons, all with the effect already applied. With the three buttons selected, we can also go to the right and select the constraints option to distribute evenly. This will mean that the text, if you move it, it will always stay this equal distance away from each other. You also want to set a constraint to the right hand side of your navbar. That way the text will always move when the navbar moves. So say you're kind of moving the page in and out widthwise, it will stay sticky to that. So I can contain this to the side and then move the padding amount in by 3 VW. Again, it's up to you how you design your site, if you want to set it by, set pixels, or if you want to use VW/VH, which is a measurement that basically works on a proportion of your screen size. So next I want to add my logo in there. I can do this by going to the top and adding an image. So I can scale this to a set size and then set the asset to contain. This will make sure it keeps to the size of the box if I decide to resize it. Boom, navigation bar is done. If I wanted to link these to different pages, I can do this in the events tab over here. But I haven't actually made those other pages yet, so I'm going to leave that bit out for now. But what we have done in creating this is learn a lot about how this program actually works and how you can add in elements and constraints to build some basic structure to your page and make it reactive. If the constraints are still a little bit confusing because it does take a little while getting used to, then there is the Dora tutorial that I used before and it was really helpful, so I'll make sure I link that down below. So now knowing the basics and using it to apply to a navigation bar, we can do the same to the rest of our page. I added in some headline text, made sure that the constraints were set to the bottom and the left of my page, and I'm planning to add some sort of 3D asset in here later to make this bit a bit more exciting. I then scrolled down to my second full page screen and built these little windows which I'm going to use to focus on my projects. I did this by using containers and text and that sort of thing, similar to how we did with the navbar. Because this little project panel is all within one outside container, when you're happy with it, you can just simply copy and paste to create multiple. I'm going to come back later to add some work into here as well. I then scrolled down and added this bottom screen. Here I've kept a yellow bar that I'll use to display some logos for people that I've worked with. And under this I've sort of split the page into two and I made a contact section, which is a bit bare, but I'm going to add in some sort of cool 3D assets here and then some links to my YouTube videos because why not? I also added this bar at the bottom, which is basically like the nav bar, but just has my social links and some other little bits of info in there. So if we zoom out and look at our page, that is the basic layout done, but we can make this way more exciting for people scrolling down the page. What we want to do for this is we're going to want to do some animation, and don't worry, it is super easy and I will walk you through it. So the way that animating works in this program is sort of how you would expect it to work and how it would work in other design programs like After Effects. You set a keyframe, you have an amount of time in between, and then you set another keyframe and then change your asset, position, size, opacity, etc. When you scan between the two keyframes, the object animates. The main difference in this is that the time parameter where you're setting these keyframes is connected to the scroll of the page. Because I made my page 300 VH, which is 3 full scrolls of a screen, my timeline from start to the end is 3 full scrolls of a page. So the keyframes you are setting represent how far you have scrolled down that page. I'll show you how we can use this on our home page. For example, my headline text here, as I scroll down, it'd be really nice if this sort of faded out. So what I can do is set a keyframe on this object at the start of our timeline, which will be when people land on our page. And then I'm going to drop the opacity down to 0 at this second keyframe. I'm going to set this so it's just before the second full screen appears. So if we check out our test site, you can see that the text here, as I scroll down the page, is working along that timeline and gradually fading out. And if we scroll back up, it fades back in. There's loads that you can do with these animations, and you can also animate in 3D. Again, if I set these project highlight cards here, which I want them to sort of animate in as you're scrolling down, because they're all in one container, I can create my keyframes and I can animate them fading in and rotating in 3D as you scroll down the page, just like we did for our text. Now, when we look at our preview site, you can see that as we scroll, the text fades out, projects rotate and fade in, giving this nice sense of depth on the page. It also kind of feels like as they're scrolling down, they're unlocking parts of the page that weren't there normally. I really like these animations and transitions as it gives people viewing the ability to play with the page scrolling up and down as things move in and out, making it more of an experience than just a static web page. So you can also add in 3D assets directly and animate them within this program. If you've not done anything in 3D before, then there's tons of assets that you can get online, or you can create your own. If you've not ventured into the world of 3D before, then I do have some videos on my YouTube channel on how you can create your own 3D assets in Adobe Illustrator, which is a nice entry point. So feel free to check those out on my channel. And also going to fill out these little project highlight pages, which I left earlier on, and going to finish off my contact button. This page is starting to look a lot more exciting now I've actually got some content in. What I also wanted to do is add a sort of hover effect over each of my projects. So when people hover over it, a 3D version appears, just making the page way more engaging and eye-catching. This can also be done in that components tab, similar to what we did when we were creating the buttons in the navigation bar. By adding a component to these containers that when hovered over, this asset appears. Now I can do that by adding in an image on that second state and then using the constraints to make sure that it always appears behind the text but is in this set position. So now if we look at a test preview of our site again, things are animating, things are appearing on screen when people hover over different parts of the page, and there's a lot going on and a lot to play with. So there we have it. Here is my finished lander page. Lots of fun and interactive elements, which I think really stands out. There's a lot for people to discover and lots for people to play around with. I found this a really fun and different approach to designing a web page, and I hope that you've enjoyed following along and trying something out a bit different. So I'm looking forward to find out what you guys can create. But if you did like today's video, then please like, comment and subscribe, as it really does help. If you do create some nice sites or portfolios, then let me know. Please send them to me because it's really exciting to see what you guys create. But yeah, thank you again for watching, and I'll catch you again soon with a new video. So take care, and I'll see you in a bit.